When that April with his showers sweet the drought of March hath pierced to the root, and bathed every vein in such liquor from which virtue engendered is the flower. When Zephyrus eke with his sweeter breath inspired hath in every holt and heath a tender croppus, and the young sun hath in the ram his half course run, and smaller fowlers maken melody that sleepen all the night with open eye. So pricketh them nature in their courages. Then longen folk to go on pilgrimages, and palmers for to seeken stranger strands, to distant shrines known in sundry lands. And especially from every shire's end of England to Canterbury they wend, the holy blissful martyr for to seek, that them hath helpen when that they were weak.
Hello and welcome to this video. You can see I'm in a different building, a similar building to where I normally am. This is a building called, well, we call it the glass building because of these incredible windows behind me. I'm based in an old carpet factory in Kidderminster, which a charity has taken over with the idea of doing community arts stuff, creative stuff, and basically giving a place for people to be creative, which I think is the most important thing. It's the thing we need in our society at the moment. But I'm not going to be talking about that on this video. But if you are interested in supporting what they do here, supporting what the charity does, then there is a link below where you can put some money in. It's nearly spring. Well, it is spring. It's March the 3rd today, and it's a beautiful day. And so I thought I'm going to talk about nature and music. So let's go out of here and get outside and have a look around this old factory, because it's just such an incredible day today, and it's going to create some incredible footage. And the thing I like about doing this, when I go on a walk around, is that if you put the headphones on, these iPhones are so incredible that you actually get to hear the sort of three-dimensional ambience. Oh, it's a beautiful day. Last week I did a video on Sting. It was a momentous video for me because I'm a massive Sting fan, and I have been since around about 1980. And through Dominic Miller, I explained to Sting that I wanted to have a joke at the end, and I wanted to see if he would be involved in that joke. And of course, he did. And there was a punchline at the end where he came out and acted like he doesn't know who I am. Of course, he doesn't really know who I am.
Andy Edwards. Never heard of him.
Whilst I'd been sort of looking at Sting's music and getting into all that, I came across his John Dowland album. So, and I forgot what it's called now. What's it called? Anyway, I'm sure I've got Alzheimer's, everybody. What's it called? Journey into something? The point is, he attributed the album to John Dowland, and that's what I wanted to talk about on this video, which is bloody brilliant. I can't remember the name of the album. Behind me is a carpet factory from this building was built in 1850. It was originally built to make rope. This bit here that I'm walking up to here, this bit here, and you can see there's a sort of, you can see that there, there's a sort of stone here. This was a little harbour, and barges would pull up nearly 200 years ago, and they dropped the rope that was made here. I mean, we're used to this in the UK, you know, that you can just find buildings. Most of the buildings around me at the moment are between 100 and 200 years old. But it is very evocative, isn't it? And when I put on this John Dowland album that Sting had made, a John Dowland was a composer in the 16th century, so he was an early Renaissance composer. He played the lute, and the lute is a very interesting instrument because the lute covers a whole huge family of instruments, which were basically coming from the oud. So, and the oud comes from basically the musical arrow. And so you're right back to the beginnings of music here. You know, the first musical arrow was probably discovered 15,000 years ago, and it was basically an arrow that was designed rather to shoot things that to, you know, make sounds. And at some point ancient man was actually making these musical arrows that were like, you know, 7 or 8 foot long, so the purpose of hunting with them had gone. And then you start to fret that, so you put a fretboard on, and then you get the oud, you get certain African instruments, and the strings instruments start to grow out. The lute really has its sound in sort of Arabic, Islamic countries, and when you hear the lute, you can hear that sound is much more apparent than it is with a guitar. When we hear a guitar, we actually hear Spain, but the root is through the Moors is sort of, that is European folk music mixing with this sort of Islamic, you know, Middle Eastern sound. Then the lute gets taken up into English music. So when you listen to John Dowland, you're hearing something that sounds very English, but actually underneath it has the echoes of all those things I described. And that becomes a nature of its Englishness. Now, what's interesting for me is that Sting is aware of that. He knows that that is his, I don't know, that's fundamentally what he is. He's a singer of songs. When the lute came to Britain and became very, very popular in the early Renaissance, and this is really evident in the amount of painters from Rubens to Caravaggio that painted people playing a lute, right? And the reason is because the lute played chords, right? It could play melodies, it could even play in a rhythmical way, but it was portable. So somebody could walk around with a lute, being a balladeer, a singer of songs. Now, John Dowland's songs are incredibly complex, incredibly weavy, and very evocative. And the album that Sting made, this John Dowland album, that I can't remember the name of, I'll put it in the description down below. And why I can recall all that facts about the lute, but I can't remember the name of the bloody album. I don't know why, but it's the nature of memory, I suppose. So when you look at the date of this John Dowland album that Sting made, right, it follows quite a long gap after he'd made 2 albums, Brand New Day and Sacred Love, I think, right? And listening to those albums, they're good albums, but I can actually hear in them the sort of inspiration, songwriting inspiration is sort of ebbing away. Sting's an incredibly competent songwriter, so the songwriting is excellent, but it seems to lack a certain thing that the early albums have. Sting had a writer's block in the 1980s, which he solved by going back to his own childhood and making the album Soul Cages. I imagine his return to John Dowland was like going even pre his birth almost, and going back to the fundamental aspects of, right, I'm going out, and as we get to this point in the video, I'm now venturing off the factory and into the nature. We're going into the nature, and I'm not very good in nature, believe it or not. Bear Grylls I ain't. Right, so here we go. Oh, bloody hell. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful here. Listen. I'm sticking to the mud. There we go. Angle that up a little bit. So, I'll show you my view at the end of the video. It's quite an incredible view. I wonder if I can get down to there. This to the birds. I'm right in the heart of nature here. And we're right back in the medieval, post-medieval Renaissance Britain. And there's a certain sound. And Sting knows it. And when he needs inspiration, he returns to it. Now, the album he made is very interesting because not only does it contain incredible versions of these Dowland songs with some virtuoso lute playing from some lute virtuoso, but also incredible harmony vocals, which are very evocative of the time. And you're back here. Now, I've thought a lot about the English countryside, because it's not really countryside. We're not really in the countryside. We're actually in the middle of a town here. But what we see is the echoes of industry. We're on the edge of what was once a big carpet factory that actually kept this town going. But it was part of nature. The River Stour, which is behind me, and I'll show you the view now. There we go. The River Stour there is part of the industry. And so with the English aesthetic, there's a compromise. Isn't there? The compromise. You're stuck. Right, oh, see, this is what happens when you're not Bear Grylls. I'm going to end up in the water. Here we go. Wow. So yeah, it's a compromise. It's man and nature in sort of harmony. That's what this represents. Even if you get out into the countryside, you see a patchwork of farms, hedges, sometimes stone built little walls. And when you get right out to where human meddling has not touched parts of Britain, it's a completely different thing. It's raw and can be very oppressive in this country when you get out into the mountains, unless it's a sunny day like this. But my point is here is that this aesthetic that I am bathing you in at the moment, and I hope you appreciate this, is actually it's wound into rock and roll. The rock and roll is actually the marriage of an American aesthetic, which comes from jazz and blues, country music and gospel, rhythm and blues. You put all that together and it creates a certain thing. But when it was married to British music, look at that. Look at the river. When it's married to this, when it's married to that, you have basically rock music.
Believe that when I see a halo around my head.
Especially prog. Well, it's 11 o'clock here on the 3rd of March 2025. A moment caught in time. The trees are still leafless. We're just coming out of the winter. Let's make our way back to the studio, if I can climb up that incline. If I fall over, this video will have everything, you do know that. Whoa! I'm walking back into the other side of the factory now. Certain rock bands exemplify this more. So with the Beatles, they do have their moments. Fall on the Hill, for example, is bathed in this. But they're much more married to an English aesthetic that's derived from the nonsense poetry of Edward Lear, Alice in Wonderland and Music Hall. But once those doors are opened by the Beatles, he walks in. Well, they don't walk in actually, because while all that's going on here in the UK, we have folk musicians like Ian Campbell, and then John Remborn, Bert Jansch, Pentangle, Fairport Convention, incredible string band that are really rock music directly married with where we've just been. Then you have the prog musicians, and yes, especially Jethro Tull, Gentle Giant often, early King Crimson, Pink Floyd sometimes, all pull from this. The most interesting album for me is Led Zeppelin 3, because when the British get hold of American rhythm and blues, right, and they create a certain sound, but it's not authentic at all. It's a British version of the blues. And a lot of those bands are trying to find a way of making it work. Now, I have to be honest, when you go back and listen to Cream on those first albums, there is that English folk influence in there, along with a whole bunch of other. I mean, their first single, Wrapping Paper, is not a sort of British blues track, is it? It is very much in the tradition of English music hall, perhaps variety music. But Led Zeppelin, with Led Zepp 3, but also Free, the band Free, as much they had those incredible funky grooves that are All Right Now and Mr. Big, they also were very evocative in being able to pull from this sort of a landscape. This goes all the way through music, and the punk musicians very quickly turn into a sort of, if you think of bands like the Levellers or New Model Army, which come out of punk, they're right in the sort of anarchist tradition, because on the surface the English aesthetic seems to be about kings and queens and, you know, being all sort of a, you know, regal. But when you get into the countryside, that's not where you are. You're in the domain of a Will-o'-the-Wisp, you're in the domain of a, I don't know, the Green Man. You're in the domain of Midsummer Night's Dream, Bottom. They are troublemakers. They're not evil, they're more naughty. And they're gonna rabble rouse that tradition is in this music too. When you come up through the 1980s, there is a whole ton of bands from Talk Talk to Tears for Fears, Art of Noise. There's so many bands coming out of the UK all the time that keep tipping their head, nodding their head actually. You know what, Tom? Yeah, I'm doing a video. It's my friend Tom, you may as well appear in it.
Hey guys, how's it going?
I'm talking about the English aesthetic. I've been out down the back of the factory talking about the influence of that rock music.
Absolutely, there's generations of different, mildly different blended aesthetics on the site.
And this is the point you're making. A lot of English history, when you get out there, it's not raw nature. It's not like the Grand Canyon. What you're talking about, there's a history there wound into it. Mm-hmm. Tom's involved in the place here. I'm doing a bit of promo as well for the thing. So hopefully you can see I am not lying. I'm not just in this factory that I'm
No, he's not alone.
I'll see you, matey. I'm going to get back up to my... So yeah, and what you just met there was an Englishman. When I say an Englishman, you know, he's quite a big guy, old Tom. So it's a bit of a, I smell the blood of an Englishman, isn't it? With old Tom. So we're back in my studio now. Well, that video is about as chaotic as it gets, wasn't it? But I hope it was interesting. I mean, I was trying to talk sense, but I was competing against the most beautiful music. I just rest that on there. This is where I normally would be doing my videos from. I was competing against that beautiful music of the English natural environment, and I'm sure it was worth watching the video for that, wasn't it? Okay then, I'm off. See you all. Bye bye.